very last thing you want to do is have your snake thinking that your hand or your fingers is indicative of that there's food there, so that when you reach into their hide, you know, they're never expecting food. The worst thing you could possibly do is open this, sorry it's got a bit of condensation on the glass, but open this thing right here. The snake gets used to feeling that vibration of it opening, right? So he already knows what that vibration means, and then just throw in something in there. That is the worst thing you could possibly do, because you're going to train him to know that that vibration means food, plus the sight of movement, your hand throwing it in there, also means food. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter how docile your snake is. If he thinks you have food, he's going to mistakenly one day, doing it like this, just putting it, he's going to mistakenly one day bite your fingers. Even if you get him somewhere in the open space of the terrarium, I don't care where you try to put him. If you're sticking your hand in there and feeding him like that, or if you're especially getting him to come to the opening of the terrarium, that's even more dumb. But even just loose like that, I'm telling you, you're going to think it won't happen. It may not happen for years. And then one day you're going to be not quick enough. Or you're going to trust him too much to understand when there's food and when there's not food. And how are they supposed to understand? You know, if you, even if the inkling of idea that, you know, this, you know, vibration could mean food, and your hand sticking or somewhere could mean food, they're opportunistic. They're very hopeful. They're like a dog dancing around for treats. If it's happened just several times, they're going to expect it to happen every time. You open this and they'll always be in food mode. So you cannot do that. The easiest way to train them is to put them in a box like this. And then they know, okay, I only get fed when I'm put in this box. Now some snakes, you can put the food in ahead of time, and they'll always go down and they'll never mistake your hand. But if you put the food ahead of time with Imber, he's going to get confused because he's a ball python, and ball pythons can smell really well. And the second he smells that rat, he may bite before you can let him go. So for something like a ball python, and that's not true for corn snakes and things, you know, yes, they can still smell, but not nearly as good as what a ball python can. Corn snakes, a lot of times you can put it in there ahead of time and train the snake to always be looking down for food, and therefore always be focusing down, so that when you put them in, they crawl in on their own. But like I said, with Imber, it's a little more difficult to do that because he can smell things so profoundly. And with a ball python, yeah, it's not ideal for them to be looking up for the food, but it's better than having the food already be in there, them smell it, and then you not be able to release the snake quick enough, and then the snake latch onto your hand or your arm or your wrist or whatever, thinking that because they smell food, you know, they just automatically whip right around and latch onto your hand, that you're trying to let them, you know, you're trying to let go of them, but that movement could be enough. Imber, ever since I've had him, has never fed live. He's always fed frozen. That's another really good thing that you can do. And I'm warning you now, I'm about to show you some dead rats. So, you know, if you get squeamish, you want to look away. I'm going to show you it because the rats aren't alive, they don't really fully learn that instinct of, oh, it's moving, it's food. You want to remove that as much as possible. Don't even, unless the snake refuses to take it, because sometimes the snake does refuse to take it. Unless the snake refuses to take it, don't be dangling it and shaking it and things like that to try and get the snake, because that is only enticing the behavior of, oh, If it moves, it's prey. Something dangling like that, if you wiggle your fingers, you know, in any sort of way and you don't realise you're doing it, we do this sometimes when we talk and things, that to them could be really similar to trying to you know, shake one of these and make it alive, essentially alive. So you try not to teach them that that movement means food, but like I said, some snakes just won't eat it unless you move it a little bit. So it depends on the snake, really. Ember's always a hungry man, so you don't need to move it for him. You just drop it in, and it just drops straight down, and he just eats it. He's probably only going to eat one of these. However, he was shedding out for about 2 weeks. He missed the meal the week before. So you typically only feed him, got slow metabolism, you only feed him about once a week. We're going to give him 2, see what he does. He's probably only going to take 1. These rats are humane, from Rodent Pro. They humanely raise and euthanize the rats. I don't think I'd have the heart otherwise. If you think about it, you know, a lot of food at your own grocery store isn't humane. So it's really nice that if you can at least find food for your pet that's humane. Always go humane when you can. Everything on Rodent Pro, everything is certified humane, both raise and slaughter. We've been using them for years. So we're going to unthaw these. This is how you unthaw a frozen rat. You do not put it in the microwave, it will explode. You do not put it in the oven, it will explode. I'm serious, the guts will explode. So you have to heat up some water. You need to make sure that it's fully unthawed, and you also need to make sure that the rat itself is not too hot, that it's not, you know, hot to the touch or anything, but it's at least warm. A lot of snakes will not eat it if it's cold. They will only take it if it's warm. Some snakes don't give a fuck, but a lot of snakes need it warm. Ember's one of those snakes that typically only takes it warm. And because you can only feed them one at a time, you know, you may have to re-warm up the water. But the biggest thing I can tell you is never feed them anything wider than the widest part of the snake. So the width of the snake at the widest part. You never want to feed anything wider than that. These are just slightly skinnier than the widest part of him. But honestly, they're, you know, for his size right now, one of these is still a decent meal, so he's capable of eating 2, but like I said, if they've been eating normally, I would not, for his size, I wouldn't offer 2, I'd only offer 1. It's just that in over 2 weeks he hadn't eaten, in over 2 weeks because of the, and a lot of people, because he was shedding out, a lot of people don't think 2 weeks is that long anyway. Some people only feed them every 2 weeks, but I think they ought to eat every week. And like I said, typically with a ball python, they got enough sense to know, okay, if I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat anymore. But something like a corn snake will literally eat themselves to death. They'll eat sometimes as many as you offer, and can get, you know, compaction and things. I'm not saying that ball python would never do that. I'm just saying typically ball pythons have less of an appetite to begin with, and therefore they stop when they're full. We'll show footage of him wrapping around it and maybe striking at it and swallowing it. So if that makes you squeamish, you know, I have to look away when I do that. So we got hot water in. My main objective is to show you a safe way to feed them. Unfortunately, some of that footage might end up being part of the video, depending on how quickly he takes it. Right, you can just hold him by the tail. Some people actually use forceps, and that's a little safer. That tail gives you, if you hold it by the very tip of the tail, that gives you so much more room to play with. And if your snake misjudges the strike and is a little clumsy like Ember is, you want to get your hand as far away from the head of the snake. The head of the, far away from, well, also from the head of the snake, but you want to get your hand as far away from the head of the rat as possible. So holding it by the tip of the tail like that, because they typically are going to strike for the head if they're any good at aiming. If you have any friends that don't realise you have a pet snake and you have rats unthawing in a, you know, glass cup like that randomly on the countertop. I've never had that happen, but I have had somebody come over and been like, oh, I'm hungry, let's see what's in the freezer. And then they see the rats and they scream, why is that in there? And then when you finally explain it to them and they calm down, it makes them even more freaked out. Snakes are strict carnivores. They will not eat anything else. They won't even eat slices of meat. It has to be something whole and intact, a full, basically, corpse. That's what they, they will not recognize it as food unless it's an entire animal. So you can see he's looking and looking and looking. So whatever side that he is looking for the food, this is a nice neat little trick you can do. Whatever the side that he's looking for the food the most, I feed him on the opposite side. Digestive tract isn't designed to eat meat that's been sitting there a while. That's why you keep the rodents frozen. That's also why, unfortunately, you have to sniff them to make sure that they're fresh. Every once in a while you get one, and this is from any company, every once in a while you get one that smells a little funny, and you know, if it smells funny to you, it smells funny to them, and usually they don't eat, they turn their nose up to it and they don't even eat it. Trying to do this one hand is a bit trickier, but we'll try. Let's see here. Okay. Just lay it in and let him find it. I don't know if you saw that, but he did try to strike at it. This is why his box is tinted. If the box isn't tinted, I recommend turn off the lights, because some snakes, especially new snakes, there we go, now he's wrapping around it. New snakes might be shy, so you need to be quiet, not make a lot of vibration or anything, and kind of leave him alone and let him at least feel like he's in a dark, safe space. A lot of snakes, all it takes is you getting too close to the box and your eye contact meeting their eyes, you being just a little too loud, it being just a little too light for them to feel exposed and not safe. I had a corn snake that would spit it out, would literally spit it out if you got close enough to the box or if the light was on. Imber's not as shy of an eater, as you can see, but he's still shy enough that we're going to leave him alone. While he's eating that, I'll take 20 to 30 minutes for him to probably finish. By that time this ratty is going to be cold again, so we're going to have to warm up this one again before we give it to him, the second one. And like I said, he probably won't take it, but because it's been over 2 weeks that he's fed, because of we had to wait for, never handle them when they're shedding. If you handle them when they're shedding, it can damage the new skin, and it can hurt them. It can give them pain too. So that's why when they're in the process of shedding, you leave them alone, however long that takes. So I said we was actually gonna give him this ratty, but this ratty, I pulled it out and sniffed it just for a moment, and this one, yeah, it's a little on the older side. About time for us to order more ratties, because this is they only last in the freezer for about a year, and it's about 8-9 months that they've been in the freezer. And when it gets that close to the time, some of them will go bad early, and that's why you always got to sniff them. I'm actually going to give this ratty to the possums, and by that I mean I'm just going to put it in the compost, and whatever finds it in the wild, usually it's going to be the possums, will eat it and have a nice meal. Okay, let's see what see if this one's fresh or not. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do this wee little runt, because Imber might say, well, I don't want 2 big ones, but he might say, well, yeah, I'm hungry enough for 1.5. I'm going to do the runt. Look at the size difference. That is huge compared to, okay. If your supplier ever gives you an extra and you're counting them and you're like, why is there an extra? It's because they gave you a free runty. Because that runty is so short, it only only needs to fill up the glass halfway. For size comparison, the other ones filled, you had to fill the glass all the way to cover it. Runty actually smells really fresh, so that's good. Hopefully he'll be hungry for 1.5. Snakes long enough, you can start to read their body language. If he starts eyeing you and following you after you've already fed him one, that probably means that he's willing to take another one. If he's just sitting there and ignoring you, then he's probably not going to take a second one. So we're going to, like I said again, it says on this side, we're going to open it on this side because it's going to be whatever side his head's on. We want to open it on the side that's furthest away from him, so that it's just easier to avoid him striking and missing and actually hitting you instead, you know. So just bear with me while I open this. Okay. And then we'll get in the Ratsy ready. Don't want to put it on top him, so I'm going to put it, kind of fling it that way and put it beside him. Okay, but I still had my hand on this side even though I flung it that way. The reason why you don't want to put it on top of them is because sometimes they're so clumsy that they can strike and accidentally bite themselves if they miss. So I put it beside him there. We'll see if he eats it. He's definitely sniffing. I know it's hard to see, but he's definitely sniffing it. That's another thing too. If they show interest, but they won't strike at it right away, if they at least show mild to moderate interest, it's worth it. Just kind of leave it in there. Come back 30 minutes later, 35 minutes later, and see whether or not they've decided to eat it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave it in there and see whether or not he decides he wants it, because he's shown at least moderate interest. He sniffed it a few times. He keeps circling around back to it. He keeps coming back to it. There he is, coming back to it again. So we're going to leave him alone. We're actually going to probably turn off the light, just to kind of further entice him to maybe eat it. So see, now he's pushing his nose against it, thinking about biting it. So yeah, we're just going to leave him alone for about 30 minutes, come back and see. He did eat it. Some snakes will regurgitate if you try to pick them up, so I'd recommend just letting them crawl back in on their own. And usually, you know, they're more than happy to just crawl back in on their own. And then do not handle them for about 42 hours, especially if it's a larger meal. I would fare off the side of, like I said, 2 days instead of 1 day. It's safer not to handle them for a full 2 days, because again, if you handle them before their food is settled, they're probably going to try to regurgitate. And that's about all there is to it. A couple of times you put them in the box, I forgot to tell you, they're probably going to be like, why am I in here? Some of the more hyper snakes, like corn snakes, might try to get out, but if it's in a dark room, typically they settle down real fast, especially when you put the food in. And then after, I'd say 3 or 4 times of doing that, they at least start to get the hang of the idea that box equals food. After about 10 to 12 times, they definitely know that box equals food. So they learn fairly fast. Of course, patience is key. You know, you cannot expect them to fully understand what you're doing. And if you've already taught them a bad habit, it's going to be much longer for them to learn. Then how did you start out right with them? The place that had him before, they were a breeder. And what the breeder would do is they'd open his drawer. He used to live in a drawer at the breeder's. They'd open his drawer, they'd throw it in. That's what I had to work with when I first got him. But because he'd only been born about 2 months ago, he'd only been at the breeder for a short period of time, and I nipped the bad habit in the bud, and within a couple of weeks, that bad habit was no longer. If you have a snake that you've been opening it and throwing it in there for years, you may never get rid of that bad habit. Best to start out, way better to start out, you know, right in the beginning.